Well, it's interesting because the White House is essentially saying that President Biden has the same goal as Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and that is to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th, to understand who was involved, to understand what was probably happening before January 6th, who may have given some of these insurrectionists, these people who broke into the U.S. Capitol, some sort of map and plan. And also, of course, what was the president doing, former President Trump, and what liabilities are there. So there's a lot of things that the White House is watching for. But White House officials also say that President Biden, while of course he's going to be looking at news clips and he's going to be looking to see what these police officers say tomorrow, they also say that he's really focused on COVID and on getting the infrastructure deal done. So in some ways, they're trying to say that, yes, the president is very interested in, of course, seeing justice done and more details about January 6th, but they're also pretty clear that they don't want this to dominate his agenda. So I think that that's a really interesting point from the White House, that they're not trying to really lean in too hard on what's happening on the Hill. But of course, it's going to be riveting testimony because there's going to be these officers talking in detail about how violent that day was, as Republicans have tried to paint it as a loving crowd at a tourist visit.
Yeah, and here's what we heard earlier today. In fact, it was this evening from January 6th committee member Adam Schiff.
Our role is going to be to fully uncover the facts. What is it that people did at that rally to instigate violence? How many of them went to that rally fully planning to do violence? We're in a different place in our country's history right now than we were on 9/11. It's a much more polarized country. Our information is more balkanized. So in that respect, the job of our committee is going to be more difficult than it has in the past.
But Chuck, the original kind of model for this 9/11 was the 9/11 Commission, right? We do, of course, now have a very different kind of panel. Are you concerned about whether this committee will be able to really come up with a kind of report, both in terms of getting to the bottom of what happened, but very importantly, taking a look at how we can make sure this never happens again?
Well, you're right, Chris. The 9/11 Commission was a model. It was created by an act of Congress signed by the president in November of 2002. And the really interesting thing about it was that it consisted of 10 people, 5 chosen by Republican leaders, 5 chosen by Democratic leaders. And if you read the preface to the 9/11 Commission report, what they say is rather remarkable, that they came together, though they had different points of view and different opinions, and wrote a single report, no minority report, no dissent. 10 people unanimously agreed to a complex set of facts and a complex set of recommendations. They came together at a time, and this is a quote from the preface of the 9/11 Commission report, at a time of great partisan divide. And so what I would like to see, and believe it or not, I'm going to finally answer your question from the January 6th committee, is the same thing, that we put aside politics, because what happened on January 6th was too big and too important for us to take a partisan approach. I wish we could do what the 9/11 Commission did. I wish we had 10 people who could come together, Republicans and Democrats, and write a single report. I doubt that will happen.
Well, I guess key to that, obviously, Yamiche, is who's going to testify, obviously, beyond those, what we know will be the riveting testimony of those 4 officers. And we heard Benny Thompson from him in writing that op-ed tonight saying, look, nothing is off limits. And I guess that begs the question, what exactly does that mean, Yamiche?
Well, it's a good question, because I was on the White House lawn today in the Rose Garden talking specifically to House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer about that exact topic. Now, of course, he isn't on the committee, but he essentially said Democrats want to talk to people who were in the room with President Trump. That, of course, would include people like Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. That would include his children. That would include other White House officials. Of course, lawmakers like Jim Jordan, Kevin McCarthy, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who my reporting and others reporting shows was on the phone with President Trump as former President Trump was watching TV and liking in some part what he was seeing. Kevin McCarthy was yelling at him to do more. All of those players are people that Democrats might want to call. But I will say I've been talking to some Democrats about this and I'm getting some interesting reporting, which is that they're also worried about executive privilege. And that meaning that when there are people that are so close to the president, like his chief of staff, there's a worry that this could set a precedent so that if, let's say, Republicans are in charge of the House and they decide that they want to subpoena Ron Klain, the current White House chief of staff, there's a feeling there on the part of some Democrats that you want to be able to claim executive privilege. That's what a lot of these White House officials are going to try to do, former White House officials from the Trump administration. But there are some Democrats cautioning that if you start interviewing and forcing executives to testify who were working for a White House, that could backfire on Democrats coming in the days forward, in the years forward.
Complicated stuff that's going to be happening on the Hill, Peter. But in the meantime, Politico is reporting on the White House considering a mask mandate for some states. Quote, officials are split on the merits of issuing new federal guidelines, with some fearing they will be politicized and embolden new Republican attacks. This camp believes recommending proof of vaccination would raise the specter of vaccine passports, an increasingly potent conservative talking point, and alienate and stigmatize portions of the country where individuals have chosen not to get the shot. And they fear calls to reimpose mask mandates will be futile. So